nobody here is ambidextrous. You either have your right hand or your left hand that is better at doing things than the other. But what we forget is that there are many pros and cons to either hand. Okay. We'll start with the left hand, as it is not my dominant hand, and therefore I talk about it more. So the left hand, you know what, everybody complains about it, everybody knows it, that modern day society is more custom built for the right hand than for the left, and that's alright, because mine is just as good as my left. Okay, never mind. But that's pretty much the only con, is that most things are built by name for right-handed people. But one of the issues that I have with that sentiment is that, for an example, look here. This is a right-handed guitar, but notice which hand does all the actual work. 'Tis the left. And that is wrong. I consider this left-handed because you're doing all the actual finger work with your left hand. So that, I feel, should be a left-handed guitar. Because if it was a right-handed guitar, I would assume that the right hand would be doing the fingering, because that is ultimately the hardest part, in my opinion, because everybody can strum with either hand. See, look, I'll demonstrate. Notice how hard it is. So that is wrong. But another thing, you notice how many doors are built supposedly for right-handed people? Like, when you're walking into a building, a lot of times the handle is going to be on the right side. But then, like, on the other side of the door, when you're walking out, the handle is on the left. Because that's basic geometry, we all know that. But if you think about it, if you're trying to quickly get in and get out, then left-handed people have an advantage of escaping a situation other than a right-handed person. Because unless you switch your hands accordingly, which I know that not many people do, they usually cross over, but that's a whole fraction of a second that could be used opening the door and running away. But another thing, since most people are right-handed, it's like you put a right-handed person at a disadvantage in any situation if you yourself are left-handed. Like, take for example, an orthodox fighter boxing with a southpaw fighter, because for one, like, it's already hard for an orthodox to figure out what's better in every situation, because his opponent is flopped, and that means that the opponent is a wild card. Bam.
Because most orthodox train against other orthodox and not southpaw.
If it's an open stance, that means that the stronger hand has more openings to all the vital parts of the body on the orthodox fighter. I mean, vice versa, but like, that still kind of sucks.
Because most likely the southpaw was taught by an orthodox, and therefore the southpaw is more experienced.
Shit, another thing. Like that one scene in Rick and Morty where Evil Morty was shaking President Morty's hand and he used his left hand it's been theorized that like that threw off the assassination's hand or whatever. I forget. But you know what, not only did I know... Well, I know that that's actually a strategy used by some people to avoid assassination attempts.
There is no proof to this. This came totally out of my ass.
can't really think of many pros for left-handed that isn't specific to me. Oh, another thing. Left-handed people. Right, okay, this is a standard PlayStation controller. Standard controller, right? So imagine you're playing Tekken or something. Like, you would assume that the hardest parts would be your right-handed buttons, but that is not the case, as with these buttons, you can just mash the shit out of them and eventually you'll hit something. But with these buttons, you're moving. You can't mash the shit out of these buttons because then you'll just end up stuttering all over the place. And eventually, because then you won't be able to hit anything because you're in the middle of moving, and that means it'll make it harder to hit something. And that's why whenever you see a button masher, they're usually always just pressing forward. Pissing me off. But either way. Yes. And with books, right, we all know that letters go from left to right, at least in English. But you notice how easy it is to flip the page with your left hand as opposed to moving it over with your right, because that's more awkward. And if you turn your pages to the left with your right hand, I don't trust you at all. Okay, that's enough of that. Pros for the right hand. Obviously, this bit's out of the way. It's way easier to write with your right hand. Also probably easier to draw with your right hand. You all know that. Because at the very least, the English alphabet was designed in mind that you were using your right hand, and therefore your left hand is at a disadvantage. Because the page, the letter. Yeah, letters are usually meant to be written right to left, ironically. Like, I know that when I was in class, when I was super bored, I used to write with my left hand just to pass the time. And I noticed that many of the letters were meant to be written with your right hand. Like, take this E, for example. You see that E right there? That E is the hardest thing to write with your left hand. Because it's straight down, then 3 to the right. See, and look. Now I get an advantage because I'm using a paper and I'm just watching the screen in order to do it mirrored like. Watch. Alright, now let's try S. It's actually not half bad. Oh yeah, I've been writing it backwards. Motherfucker. Either way, you get the point. The alphabet was tailor-made for right-handed people, and that's the way it is. And also, you notice that a lot of things that are ergonomic are usually meant for your right hand. And if you don't believe me, just look at the Wii remote. Most games on the Wii are usually tailor-made for your right hand, and left-handedness is just an afterthought.
Wrong. Wii Sports asks if you're left-handed.
We could bring up every single Legend of Zelda game on the Wii. You notice that in every other game, Link is left-handed, and therefore sometimes it breaks the not really. That means if you're left-handed and you play The Legend of Zelda, you're not gonna have the same experience as someone who plays with their right hand, because then you're using your non-dominant hand, and that is a pro for the right-handed. I'm not really sure if that's a con for the left-handed, but the right-handed have it so much better. You know what? A pro for left-handed people is that when we have things that are actually left-handed, sometimes we don't even notice. And I'll bring up the guitar again. No, I dropped that. No. Ah!
And that, children, is why I wear shades.
Another thing that us right-handed people may not realize is that whenever we have a game thingy, whenever we have a game case like this, sometimes we forget that this may look more right-handed. As you see, I'm holding it with my right hand, but you forget that I must open it with my left, take it open, and the disc is on the right side, but you forget that you have to use your left hand to use that. I bring this up because this is something that my dad used to do. Who the hell tapes the freaking thing? That's my dad used to do to make it easier for him. He would take out the paper and he would flip it around so that it would be easier for him to grab it. I don't know why. I think he must have hurt himself somehow. But it's so that he could grab the disc with his left hand without feeling awkward. So I guess that goes to a pro for left-handed. I don't know. Con for right. Honestly, I don't think that there is a con for being right-handed. I think life's just kind of cool like that. Cause you know, life is cruel to people who aren't the majority. See, look how much easier it is to open up with the right hand now. Shit, it's still with your left. Never mind. I'm pissed off now. I guess the only pros about right hand, yeah, you know what? I think the only con of being right-handed is that, like, the right hand isn't used for anything more than just, you know, doing the cool things like holding scissors and doing salutes. And, like, honestly, we should have more things built for the left hand, actually, because I personally, I don't know if everybody else does this, but I use my left hand for things that the right hand can do. Like, say, you know, even though I'm right-handed, the left hand is still stronger than the right because I use this to hold heavy things. And, like, I use this to carry stuff, like all the brute force kind of things that not many people think about. And then I use my right hand for, like, all the writing and, like, twisting and turning of things. And, of course, the most delicate procedure of them all. And what comes with that is that my left hand is tougher, and if you look, it actually has more scars than the right hand. But that doesn't interest anybody. Well, these videos sure are getting lamer as they go on. Can't think of anything to say anymore. And no wonder WeirdoCast fell through.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking kind